Last night, at exactly 3:17 a.m., I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing. Unknown number. When I answered, all I heard was a child's voice singing a lullaby I'd never heard before. But here's the terrifying part. The caller ID showed it was. Coming from inside a museum that's been closed for renovations for the past 6 months, a museum where a certain porcelain doll used to be displayed, my hands are still shaking as I record this. Because what I discovered when I investigated that call has convinced me that something truly evil has awakened. Something that's been hunting children for over a century. Something that knows my name, knows where I live, and knows that I'm about to expose its darkest secrets. This is security footage from the Riverside Museum taken last Tuesday at 2:43 a.m. Watch the display case in the corner. Did you see that? The doll that was supposed to be locked away in storage just ... appeared. But that's not the most disturbing part. Look at her eyes. They're not looking at the camera. They're looking directly at you. In 1918, a toy maker named Heinrich Zimmerman created what he thought would be his masterpiece. Instead, he unleashed something that has terrorized families across 7 states for 105 years. Children have vanished. Parents have gone insane. Entire towns have tried to forget what they witnessed. But Mandy remembers everything. She remembers. Every child who ever looked into her glass eyes. She remembers every family she's destroyed. And according to the evidence I've uncovered, she's not just some passive haunted object collecting dust in an attic. She's actively hunting. And she's getting stronger. The authorities don't want you to know about the 17 missing children cases linked to antique doll sightings in the past 5 years. They don't want you to know about the psychiatric ward filled with adults who claim a porcelain doll stole their childhood memories. They definitely don't want you to know about the underground network of researchers who've been tracking her movements across the country. But I'm going to tell you everything. Every documented incident, every witness testimony, every piece of evidence they've tried to bury, because right now, Mandy could be in any antique shop, any estate sale, any grandmother's attic. And if you have children, if you love children, if you want to protect the innocent, you need to know what you're up against. This isn't just another ghost story or urban legend. This is a survival guide. Because Mandy isn't just real, she's coming. And the only thing standing between her and her next victim might be you. The story of Mandy begins in 1918 in a small town called Millbrook, nestled in the countryside of Vermont. It was here that a local toy maker named Heinrich Zimmerman crafted what would become one of the most notorious haunted objects in American paranormal history. Zimmerman was known throughout the region for his exquisite handmade dolls, each one unique and crafted with meticulous attention to detail. But Mandy was different from the very beginning. According to the original documentation I found in the Millbrook Historical Society archives, Zimmerman spent nearly 6 months creating Mandy. This was unusual for him, as he typically completed a doll within 2 to 3 weeks. Neighbors reported seeing him working through the night, his workshop, windows glowing with candlelight long after midnight. Some claimed they heard him talking to someone inside, though he lived alone and never received visitors during his work sessions. The first sign that something was wrong came when Zimmerman's apprentice, a young man named Thomas Burke, refused to enter the workshop during Mandy's creation. In a letter to his sister that still exists today, Burke wrote about feeling an overwhelming sense of dread whenever he approached the building while Zimmerman was working on the doll. He described hearing what sounded like a child's laughter coming from inside, even though no children were present. When Mandy was finally completed, Zimmerman's behavior became even more erratic. Townspeople reported seeing him carrying the doll around town, speaking to it as if it were a real child. He would set a place for Mandy at the local diner and insist that she needed her own chair. The waitresses humored him at first, thinking it was just an old man's eccentricity, but they soon noticed something disturbing. When Zimmerman wasn't looking directly at the doll, several witnesses swear they saw Mandy's head turn slightly, as if she were observing her surroundings. The first documented incident of Mandy's supernatural activity occurred just 3 weeks. After her completion, Mrs. Eleanor Hartwell, who lived next door to Zimmerman, was awakened one night by the sound of a child singing. This was strange because there were no children living on their street, and it was well past midnight. When she looked out her window to investigate, she saw Mandy sitting alone on Zimmerman's front porch, seemingly moving her mouth in rhythm. With the haunting melody, Mrs. Hartwell's testimony, which I found in a police report from 1918, describes the song as unlike anything she had ever heard. It was beautiful but deeply unsettling, with lyrics in what sounded like an ancient language. The melody seemed to get inside her head, and she found herself humming it for days afterward, unable to get it out of her mind. When she asked Zimmerman about it the next morning, he claimed to have no knowledge of any singing and insisted that Mandy had been safely stored in his workshop all night. This was just the beginning of Mandy's reign of terror in Millbrook. Over the following months, reports of strange incidents began to multiply. Children in the neighborhood complained of nightmares featuring a porcelain doll that would whisper their names and promise to play with them forever. Parents initially dismissed these as typical childhood fears, but the descriptions the children gave were remarkably consistent and detailed, including specific details about Mandy's appearance that they had no way of knowing. Local shop owner Margaret Flynn reported that items in her store would mysteriously rearrange themselves overnight. She would arrive each morning to find dolls and toys move from their original positions, always arranged in a circle, as if they had been having a meeting. Security measures proved useless, as no signs of forced entry were ever found. Only stopped when Flynn finally banned Heinrich Zimmerman and his doll from entering her establishment. Perhaps the most disturbing incident from this period involved the Patterson family, who lived 3 houses down from Zimmerman. Their 5-year-old daughter, Sarah, began displaying sudden and dramatic behavioral changes. The previously cheerful and outgoing child became withdrawn and would spend hours staring out her bedroom window toward Zimmerman's house. When her parents asked what she was looking at, Sarah would simply say that Mandy was calling to her. One evening, Sarah's mother found her daughter's bed empty. After a frantic search, they discovered Sarah standing in Zimmerman's front yard at 3 in the morning, still in her nightgown, having a conversation with Mandy. The doll was positioned in the upstairs window of Zimmerman's house. Yet Sarah insisted that Mandy had been talking to her, telling her stories about children from long ago who had become her special friends. The incident that finally led to Mandy's removal from Millbrook occurred on Halloween night, 1918. The town's annual Harvest Festival was taking place in the central square, and nearly everyone in the community was in attendance. Heinrich Zimmerman arrived with Mandy, claiming that she wanted to see the festivities. He placed the doll on a bench near the stage where local musicians were performing. What happened next was witnessed by over 200 people, and their testimonies remain remarkably consistent even today. During a lull between musical performances, when the square had fallen unusually quiet, Mandy began to move. Not subtle movements that could be explained by wind or vibration, but deliberate, purposeful actions. She turned her head to survey the crowd, raised one porcelain hand in what appeared to be a wave, and then, according to multiple witnesses, she spoke. In a voice described as both childlike and ancient, Mandy allegedly said, "I want to play with all the children, forever and ever." The effect on the crowd was immediate and dramatic. Children began crying hysterically. Several adults fainted, and a general panic ensued. In the chaos that followed, Heinrich Zimmerman disappeared into the night, taking Mandy with him. The townspeople organized search parties, but Zimmerman and his doll were never found. Some believed he had fled to escape the growing suspicion and fear surrounding Mandy. Others whispered darker theories, suggesting that the doll had somehow consumed her creator, as she had apparently been trying to do with the local children. For 30 years, Mandy's whereabouts remained unknown. The town of Millbrook slowly returned to normal, though parents continued to tell their children cautionary tales about the haunted doll who might return to steal away naughty boys and girls. These stories might have remained local folklore, if not for a discovery. Made in 1948 by a young couple renovating an abandoned farmhouse outside of Burlington, Vermont. David and Patricia Morrison had purchased the property sight unseen, planning to restore it as their family home. While cleaning out the attic, Patricia discovered an old trunk hidden beneath decades of dust and debris. Inside, carefully wrapped in yellowed cloth, was Mandy. Even after 30 years, the doll was in perfect condition, her porcelain skin unmarred by time and her glass eyes as clear and piercing as ever. The Morrisons were unaware of Mandy's history when they decided to clean her up and display her in their living room. They thought she was simply a beautiful antique that would complement their home's vintage aesthetic. This decision would prove to be a catastrophic mistake that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. The first sign of trouble came within. A week of bringing Mandy into their home, the couple's infant son, Michael, who had been a peaceful sleeper since birth, suddenly began experiencing severe night terrors. He would wake up screaming, pointing toward the living room where Mandy was displayed, babbling in what sounded like a language no infant should know. When they moved the doll to the basement, Michael's condition improved dramatically. Curious about their discovery, David Morrison began researching the doll's origins. His investigation led him to the Millbrook Historical Society, where he uncovered the disturbing truth about Mandy's past. Despite this knowledge, the couple couldn't bring themselves to destroy what was clearly a valuable antique. Instead, they decided to donate her to the local museum, hoping that professional curators would know how to handle such an unusual artifact. Dr. Elizabeth Crane, museum's chief curator, was fascinated by Mandy's history and craftsmanship. She placed the doll in a specially designed display case in the museum's folklore section, complete with information about her alleged supernatural properties. Dr. Crane was a rational, scientific woman who didn't believe in ghosts or haunted objects. But she was about to receive an education in the reality of paranormal phenomena. The museum staff began reporting strange incidents almost immediately after Mandy's arrival. Security guards complained of hearing footsteps in the folklore section during their night rounds, even though motion sensors showed no human presence. In the area, cleaning staff found Mandy's display case rearranged each morning, with the doll positioned differently than she had been left the previous evening. Most disturbing of all, several visitors reported that Mandy's eyes seemed to track their movements as they walked past her display. Dr. Crane initially attributed these reports to suggestion and folklore, believing that people were seeing what they expected to see based on Mandy's reputation. Her skepticism began to waver when the museum's security cameras captured something that defied explanation. During a routine review of overnight footage, Dr. Crane observed Mandy moving inside her locked display case. The movements were subtle, but unmistakable, the doll's head turning slowly from side to side, as if she were scanning her surroundings. The footage was examined by experts in video analysis and digital effects, all of whom confirmed that it had not been tampered with or manipulated. The recording showed clear evidence of movement that could not be explained by vibration, temperature changes, or any other conventional cause. Word of the video spread quickly through paranormal research communities, and the museum began receiving visits from investigators and enthusiasts from around the world. Among these visitors was Dr. James Blackwood, a renowned parapsychologist from Harvard University, who had spent decades studying alleged haunted objects. Dr. Blackwood arrived at the museum with a team of researchers and sophisticated monitoring equipment, determined to either debunk Mandy's supernatural reputation or document genuine paranormal activity. The investigation lasted 2 weeks and produced some of the most compelling evidence of supernatural phenomena ever recorded. Dr. Blackwood's team documented dramatic temperature fluctuations in Mandy's vicinity, electromagnetic field disturbances that followed no recognizable pattern, and audio recordings of what appeared to be whispered conversations in an unknown language. Most remarkably, they captured footage of Mandy apparently responding to direct questions, nodding or shaking her head in what seemed to be intelligent communication. During one particularly intense session, Dr. Blackwood attempted to communicate directly with whatever presence inhabited the doll. Using a combination of historical research and intuition, he addressed Mandy by name and asked about her connection to Heinrich Zimmerman. The response was immediate and terrifying. The temperature in the room dropped by 15 degrees in a matter of seconds, and Mandy's head turned to face Dr. Blackwood directly, in a voice that was clearly audible on the recording equipment. Though no one in the room heard it at the time, Mandy allegedly said, "He gave me life, but I gave him purpose. We are one now, and we hunger for companionship." The audio analysis revealed that the voice contained harmonic frequencies that should not have been possible to produce without sophisticated equipment. And the spectral analysis showed patterns that didn't match any known human vocal characteristics. Dr. Blackwood's investigation concluded with a recommendation that Mandy be contained using specific protocols he had developed for handling dangerous supernatural artifacts. The museum agreed to implement these measures, which included placing the doll in a specially blessed containment unit, surrounding the display with protective symbols from various religious traditions, and limiting visitor access to prevent potential psychological influence. These precautions proved insufficient. Within 6 months of their implementation, the museum experienced a series of incidents that forced them to reconsider Mandy's presence entirely. Visitors began reporting physical sensations of being touched or grabbed while viewing the doll, despite being several feet away from the display case. Children became particularly affected, with many experiencing what psychologists term doll fixation syndrome. It's an obsessive need to return to the museum repeatedly to see Mandy. The breaking point came when a 7-year-old girl named Emma Rodriguez went missing during a family visit to the museum. Security footage showed Emma walking normally through the folklore section with her parents, then suddenly stopping in front of Mandy's display case. For nearly 10 minutes, the child stood motionless, apparently transfixed by the doll. When her parents finally noticed her absence and began searching, they found Emma in a restricted storage area behind the exhibit, claiming that Mandy had called to her and asked her to come play. Emma's description of her experience was both detailed and disturbing. She claimed that Mandy had spoken to her telepathically, showing her visions of other children who had become the doll's special friends over the decades. According to Emma, these children existed in a timeless state, playing eternal games, with Mandy in a place that wasn't quite the real world but wasn't completely imaginary either. The incident prompted an immediate review of the museum's policies regarding Mandy. Dr. Crane, now convinced of the doll's supernatural nature, argued for immediate removal of the exhibit. However, the museum's board of directors was reluctant to dispose of what had become their most popular attraction, drawing visitors from around the globe and generating significant revenue. The compromise solution was to move Mandy to a more secure location within the museum, accessible only to researchers and serious paranormal investigators. The doll was placed in a climate-controlled vault in the museum's basement, surrounded by multiple layers of protective barriers and monitored by both electronic surveillance and trained observers. This arrangement lasted for several years, during which time Mandy's supernatural activity seemed to diminish significantly. Creators theorized that the isolation and protective measures had somehow limited the doll's ability to influence the living world. This period of relative calm was shattered in 1987 when Dr. Sarah Whitman, folklore specialist from Yale University, was granted access to study Mandy for her doctoral dissertation on American supernatural beliefs. Dr. Whitman spent 3 months working closely with Mandy, documenting every aspect of the doll's construction, history, and alleged paranormal properties. Her research was thorough and scientific, approaching the subject with healthy skepticism while remaining open to the possibility of genuine supernatural phenomena. What she discovered during her investigation would change her life forever and add new chapters to Mandy's already extensive catalog of supernatural incidents. During her detailed examination of the doll's construction, Dr. Whitman made a disturbing discovery. Hidden within Mandy's porcelain head, accessible only through a small opening behind her left ear, was a collection of what appeared to be human hair and fingernails. Laboratory analysis revealed that these organic materials belonged to at least 7 different individuals, ranging in age from approximately 5 to 12 years old. The materials showed no signs of decomposition despite their apparent age, suggesting some form of supernatural preservation. More disturbing still was Dr. Whitman's discovery of tiny inscriptions carved into the inside of Mandy's skull. The markings were in a language that linguistic experts couldn't identify, though they bore similarities to various ancient European dialects. When Dr. Whitman traced these symbols and attempted to pronounce them aloud during her research, she triggered a response from Mandy that nearly cost her life. According to Dr. Whitman's recorded notes from that day, Mandy's eyes suddenly blazed with an inner light that wasn't reflected by any external source. The doll's mouth opened, revealing tiny porcelain teeth that seemed far too sharp and numerous for a normal toy. Most terrifyingly, Mandy spoke directly to Dr. Whitman.
"Oh, baby."
Not in the childlike voice that others had reported, but in a deep, resonant tone that seemed to come from somewhere far beneath the earth. The entity speaking through Mandy identified itself as something far older and more malevolent than anyone had previously suspected. It claimed to have existed for centuries before, inhabiting the doll, moving from vessel to vessel throughout history, always seeking children to add to its collection of eternal playmates. Heinrich Zimmerman, it revealed, had not created Mandy so much as he had provided a suitable home for this ancient presence. Dr. Whitman's experience left her traumatized but determined to find a way to neutralize the threat that Mandy represented. She spent the remaining weeks of her research period developing a complex ritual based on her interpretation of the inscriptions found inside the doll's head. The ritual was designed to sever the connection between the malevolent entity and its porcelain host, potentially freeing any trapped souls and rendering the doll harmless. The attempt to perform this ritual nearly resulted in disaster. As Dr. Whitman began the incantation she had carefully prepared, Mandy's supernatural activity escalated beyond anything previously recorded. The entire basement level of the museum experienced violent tremors, as if an earthquake were occurring directly beneath the building. Electronic equipment throughout the facility malfunctioned simultaneously, and several staff members reported hearing the sounds of children crying and laughing echoing through the halls. Most alarmingly, other dolls and mannequins throughout the museum began moving of their own accord, turning their heads toward the basement, as if responding to some invisible summons. Security cameras captured footage of dozens of artificial figures apparently trying to make their way toward Mandy's location, creating a scene that resembled a supernatural pilgrimage. The ritual was abruptly halted when Dr. Whitman collapsed, overcome by what witnesses described as an invisible force that seemed to be draining her life energy. Medical examination revealed no physical cause for her condition, but she remained unconscious for 3 days. When she finally awakened, she had no memory of the ritual attempt and seemed to have aged several years in the span of those few hours. Following this incident, the museum's board finally agreed that Mandy posed too great a risk to keep on the premises. However, the question of what to do with the doll proved more complicated than anyone had anticipated. No other institution was willing to accept responsibility for housing a proven supernatural threat, and attempts to destroy the doll had failed repeatedly. When exposed to fire, Mandy's porcelain body proved impossibly resistant to heat. Attempts to break her with hammers resulted in the tools shattering while leaving the doll completely undamaged. The solution came from an unexpected source. Father Miguel Santos, a Catholic priest who specialized in exorcism and supernatural phenomena, approached the museum with an offer to take custody of Mandy. Father Santos had dealt with haunted objects before and believed he could contain the doll's malevolent influence using specific religious protocols. The museum gratefully accepted his offer, and Mandy was transferred to a specialized vault beneath St. Augustine's Cathedral in Hartford, Connecticut. Father Santos's approach to containing Mandy was based on centuries of Catholic doctrine regarding the binding of evil spirits. The doll was placed in a specially consecrated chamber, surrounded by holy relics and blessed artifacts from around the world. Daily prayers and rituals were performed to maintain the spiritual barriers that kept Mandy's influence contained within the chamber. For over a decade, this arrangement seemed successful. Reports of supernatural activity around Mandy dropped to almost nothing, and Father Santos believed that the entity inhabiting the doll had been successfully neutralized. This confidence proved premature when, in 2003, a young seminarian named Brother Thomas Kelligan made an unauthorized visit to Mandy's containment chamber. Brother Kelligan had become obsessed with the doll's history during his theological studies. Writing his thesis on the intersection of folk beliefs and genuine spiritual phenomena, against Father Santos's explicit instructions, he entered the chamber alone, late one night, hoping to observe Mandy firsthand and perhaps conduct his own investigation into her supernatural properties. What happened during Brother Kelligan's encounter with Mandy remains unclear. as he was found the next morning in a catatonic state, sitting cross-legged in front of the doll's container with tears streaming down his face. Medical examination revealed no physical trauma, but Brother Callaghan remained unresponsive to all attempts at communication for several weeks. When he finally regained consciousness, he claimed to have no memory of entering the chamber or of anything that had occurred during his missing hours. However, Brother Callaghan's personality had changed dramatically. Previously known for his gentle nature and scholarly disposition, became aggressive and paranoid, constantly muttering about children's voices that only he could hear. Most disturbing of all, he began speaking fluent Latin phrases that he had never studied, using grammatical constructions that hadn't been employed for over 1,000 years. Church authorities eventually determined that he required extended psychological treatment and removed him from the seminary program. Following this incident, Father Santos implemented even more stringent security measures around Mandy's containment. Access to the chamber was restricted to himself alone, and he increased the frequency of protective rituals performed in the area. Despite these precautions, strange phenomena continued to occur in the cathedral, particularly in the section directly above Mandy's vault. Parishioners began reporting unusual experiences during services. Children would suddenly become distracted during Mass, staring at the floor as if they could see through the stone to whatever lay beneath. Several families stopped attending the cathedral entirely after their young children began having nightmares about a doll who lived under the church and called to them during their sleep. The situation reached a crisis point in 2018, exactly 100 years after Mandy's creation. On the anniversary of that Halloween night in Millbrook, when the doll had first spoken publicly, Father Santos discovered that the locks on Mandy's containment chamber had somehow opened from the inside. The blessed barriers that had surrounded the doll for over 15 years had been carefully arranged in a perfect circle around her empty container, as if they had been moved by someone with intimate knowledge of their protective properties. Mandy herself was missing, with no trace of how she had escaped from a chamber that had no other exits and was monitored by both electronic surveillance and blessed wards. Security footage from that night showed nothing unusual, leading investigators to conclude that whatever power inhabited the doll was capable of moving undetected by conventional means. The search for Mandy lasted months and involved both law enforcement agencies and paranormal investigators from around the country. Reports of sightings came from across New England, each following a similar pattern. Witnesses would glimpse a porcelain doll in unexpected locations, antique shops, estate sales, private homes, always accompanied by an overwhelming sense of dread and the sound of children's laughter that seemed to come from nowhere. Most of these sightings proved to be false alarms or misidentifications, but several were accompanied by documented supernatural phenomena. In each case where Mandy's presence was confirmed, local children began experiencing nightmares and behavioral changes identical to those reported throughout her history. The doll never remained in one location for long, disappearing as mysteriously as she had arrived, leaving behind only frightened families and unanswered questions. The most credible recent sighting occurred just last year, when amateur paranormal investigator Rachel Morrison, no relation to the couple who had originally found Mandy in 1948, encountered the doll during an overnight investigation at an abandoned orphanage in rural Massachusetts. Morrison had brought sophisticated recording equipment to document what she believed would be a routine ghost hunt. But she captured evidence that convinced even skeptical researchers of Mandy's continued supernatural activity. The footage shows Morrison exploring the orphanage's attic when she suddenly stops, pointing her flashlight at a corner of the room. Where sitting among old toys and forgotten furniture is Mandy. The doll appears exactly as she had been described. In historical accounts, her porcelain features unmarked by time and her glass eyes reflecting the flashlight beam with an inner luminescence that suggests awareness. As Morrison approaches for a closer look, Mandy's head turns to face her directly. The movement is slow and deliberate, accompanied by the sound of grinding porcelain that shouldn't occur in a properly made doll. Morrison's camera captures what happens next in perfect clarity. Mandy's mouth opens, revealing the same unnaturally sharp teeth that Dr. Whitman had described decades earlier. and she speaks directly to Morrison. The words are in that same unknown language that has been associated with Mandy throughout her history. But the meaning is somehow clear to Morrison, who later claimed she understood every syllable despite never having heard the language before. According to Morrison's account, Mandy was explaining the rules of a game that had been continuing for over a century and would continue for centuries more. The prize for winning was eternal childhood, never growing old, never feeling pain, never being alone. The cost was leaving behind the world of the living forever. Morrison's footage ends abruptly when her camera battery died. Despite having been fully charged moments before, when she regained consciousness, she was lying outside the orphanage, with no memory of how she had gotten there. Mandy was gone, along with any evidence that she had ever been in the building. The only proof of the encounter was the recording on Morrison's camera, which has since been analyzed by experts and deemed authentic. Today, Mandy's whereabouts remain unknown. Law enforcement agencies maintain an open file on her disappearance, though they're reluctant to discuss the supernatural aspects of the case publicly. Paranormal research organizations continue to track reported sightings, hoping to locate the doll before she can claim any more victims. Father Santos, now retired but still consulting on supernatural cases, believes that Mandy has entered a new phase of her existence, one where she no longer requires a fixed location to exert her influence. The investigation into Mandy's nature has revealed disturbing connections to similar cases throughout history. Archaeological evidence suggests that the entity inhabiting the doll may be connected to ancient fertility cults that practiced child sacrifice, believing that the souls of young victims could be trapped and utilized to achieve immortality. Heinrich Zimmerman's family history includes several ancestors who were accused of witchcraft in 17th century Germany, suggesting that his creation of Mandy may not have been entirely accidental. Modern researchers have developed new theories about how Mandy's supernatural abilities function. Dr. Patricia Newman, a quantum physicist who has studied paranormal phenomena, believes that the doll exists simultaneously in multiple dimensions, allowing her to move between locations without traversing the physical space between them. This would explain how she can appear and disappear without leaving traces, and how she can influence events from a distance. The psychological impact of Mandy's presence has also been studied extensively. Children who have encountered her, either directly or through her influence, show remarkably consistent patterns of behavior change. They become withdrawn from adult authority figures while simultaneously exhibiting an unusual fascination with antique toys and dolls. Many develop an imaginary friend who matches Mandy's description perfectly. Despite having no prior knowledge of her appearance, perhaps most troubling are the accounts from now adult survivors of childhood encounters with Mandy. Many report recurring dreams throughout their lives featuring the doll, dreams that feel more like memories than products of imagination. In these dreams, they describe playing with Mandy and other children in a place that exists outside normal time and space. A place where it's always dusk and the games never end. Several of these adults have attempted to return to locations where they encountered Mandy as children, hoping to find closure or answers about their experiences. Without exception, these visits have resulted in renewed supernatural activity and the reactivation of childhood traumas they thought they had overcome. Mental health professionals who have worked with these individuals describe their cases as unique in the field of trauma psychology, involving memories that seem to exist independently of normal psychological processes. The religious community has also grappled with the implications of Mandy's existence. Various denominations have offered different explanations for her supernatural nature, ranging from demonic possession to an ancient pagan spirit that predates Christian theology. Attempts at exorcism have universally failed, leading some theologians to conclude that Mandy represents a form of evil that exists outside the traditional framework of religious understanding. Recent developments in the case have focused on preventing Mandy from claiming new victims rather than attempting to destroy or contain her. A network of paranormal researchers, law enforcement officials, and religious leaders has formed to track reported sightings and warn potential targets. They've developed protocols for recognizing the early signs of Mandy's influence and intervening before children can be seriously affected. Educational programs have been quietly implemented in schools throughout New England, disguised as general safety curricula, but actually designed to teach children how to recognize and resist supernatural manipulation. These programs emphasize the importance of telling trusted adults about unusual experiences and provide specific warning signs that might indicate contact with malevolent entities like Mandy. The technology used to monitor Mandy's activities has also evolved significantly. Advanced electromagnetic field detectors can now identify the specific frequency patterns associated with her presence, giving investigators early warning when she appears in a new location. Thermal imaging cameras can detect the temperature anomalies that accompany her manifestations, while new audio analysis software can isolate the unique harmonic signatures of her voice from background noise. Despite these advances, Mandy continues to evade capture and containment. Her appearances have become more sporadic but also more intense, suggesting that she may be adapting to the increased surveillance and developing new methods of avoiding detection. Some researchers believe that the century-long documentation of her activities has somehow strengthened her supernatural abilities. Feeding on the fear and fascination that her story generates, the psychological profile developed by behavioral analysts suggests that Mandy's entity possesses a form of intelligence that learns and evolves over time. Each encounter provides her with new information about human psychology and modern technology, allowing her to refine her methods of manipulation and influence. This adaptive capability makes her far more dangerous than a simple haunted object, elevating her to the level of a genuine supernatural predator. Recent sightings have shown variations in Mandy's appearance and behavior that weren't documented in earlier encounters. Witnesses report that her clothing sometimes changes to match contemporary children's fashion, and her speech patterns have modernized to include current slang and cultural references. These adaptations suggest that she's actively studying human society and adjusting her approach to remain relevant to each new generation of potential victims. The implications of Mandy's evolving nature extend beyond individual safety concerns to broader questions about the nature of supernatural entities and their relationship with human society. If she can learn and adapt, what other capabilities might she develop over time? Could she eventually transcend her physical form entirely, existing as a purely psychic entity that no longer requires a doll as a vessel? These questions have prompted the formation of an international research consortium dedicated to studying adaptive supernatural phenomena. Scientists, theologians, and paranormal investigators from around the world are collaborating to understand entities like Mandy and develop effective countermeasures. Their work represents the first systematic attempt to apply rigorous scientific methodology to the study of genuinely supernatural threats. The emotional toll on the families affected by Mandy's influence cannot be overstated. Parents whose children have encountered her describe a unique form of helplessness. Knowing that conventional protective measures are useless against a supernatural threat, support groups have formed to help these families cope with their experiences and share information about managing the long-term effects of supernatural trauma. Many of these parents have become advocates for greater public awareness of supernatural dangers, arguing that society's general skepticism about paranormal phenomena leaves children vulnerable to entities like Mandy. They've pushed for the inclusion of supernatural safety education in school curricula and the development of specialized therapy programs for children who have experienced paranormal trauma. The legal system has also struggled to address cases involving Mandy's influence. How do you prosecute a crime committed by a supernatural entity? How do you protect children from a threat that doesn't exist in any conventional sense? These questions have led to the development of new legal frameworks and the training of specialized law enforcement units that can respond to paranormal emergencies. As we approach the 110th anniversary of Mandy's creation, the doll's legend continues to grow and evolve. New sightings are reported regularly, each adding to the ever-expanding documentation of her supernatural abilities. The internet age has allowed for unprecedented sharing of information about her appearances, creating a global network of researchers and witnesses who track her movements across continents. Social media has become both a tool for spreading awareness about Mandy's dangers and a potential vector for her influence. Several incidents have been reported where children became fixated on Mandy after viewing images or videos of her online, suggesting that her supernatural abilities may extend through digital media. This has led to debates about whether information about supernatural entities should be freely shared or carefully controlled to prevent accidental exposure. The documentary evidence surrounding Mandy's existence represents one of the most comprehensive paranormal case files ever assembled. From Heinrich Zimmerman's original workshop notes to modern thermal imaging footage, researchers have created a timeline spanning over a century that demonstrates the reality of supernatural phenomena in unprecedented detail. This documentation has become a cornerstone of academic paranormal research and has influenced the methodology used to study other allegedly haunted objects. Yet despite all this evidence and research, Mandy herself remains free, continuing her centuries-long game of collecting children's souls. She represents a form of evil that predates human civilization, using our modern world's technology and connectivity to extend her reach further than ever before. Every parent's nightmare of something taking their child has a face. That face belongs to a seemingly innocent porcelain doll with glass eyes that see everything and a smile that promises games that never end. The truth about Mandy is that she's not just a haunted doll or a supernatural curiosity. She's a predator who has perfected her hunting techniques over more than a century, adapting to each era while maintaining her fundamental nature as a collector of innocent souls. She's still out there, still looking for new playmates, still whispering promises of eternal childhood to anyone young enough to believe in the magic of toys that come to life. If you ever encounter an antique doll that seems too perfect, too well-preserved, too aware of your presence, remember Mandy's story. If you hear children's laughter where no children should be, if you feel watched by eyes that shouldn't be able to see, if you find yourself humming a song you've never heard before, you might have encountered something far more dangerous than a simple toy. The investigation into Mandy continues, driven by the hope that someday we'll find a way to end her reign of terror permanently. Until then, awareness and vigilance remain our best defenses against a threat that exists in the shadowy borderland between childhood, imagination, and supernatural reality. Thank you for joining me on this journey into one of the most disturbing paranormal cases in documented history. The story of Mandy the Haunted Doll serves as a reminder that some mysteries are too dangerous to ignore, and that the line between legend and reality is sometimes thinner than we dare to imagine. If this video has made you think twice about that antique doll in your grandmother's attic, or that too perfect toy in the vintage shop window, then perhaps Mandy's story has served its purpose as a warning to the living about the dangers that lurk in the world of the supernatural. Remember to like and subscribe if you want to see more investigations into the dark corners of the paranormal world. And let me know in the comments if you've ever